So we're going over decimals, rounding, and reading tables. But on the back here, guys, I kind of just have you have a cheat. You might not need this, but if you do, it's here for you. Right here in the middle, it's hard to tell, but there's a very dark, or supposed to be a darker line. Guys, that's where the decimal point is, okay? So anything to the left is ones, tens, hundreds that we're comfortable with. And then the decimals, they actually are showing it with fractions, but this is a tenth, so it's one decimal over. I always just remember however many decimals over you are, that's how many zeros you have, right? If you're one decimal over, that's a tenth. 10 has 1 0. That's kind of how I remember. Again, something that we've all seen, something we've all dealt with, but by reviewing it real quickly, it makes a world of difference because how many of you done my math lab before? A handful of you? You know how picky they can be. Like, you can be off by a tenth or a hundredth or something, and they're yelling at you, and you think you've done the whole problem wrong, and it's just you've rounded wrong, okay? So we want to make sure we feel comfortable. So real quickly, let's go over this. The first two are just making sure we understand where the 5 is in each of the numbers. So where is the 5 in number 1? What place? What place value is that? Hundreds, right? Yeah, don't be scared to talk up, guys. All right. The 5 here, though, is where? Well, these are the hundreds, thousands, and these are the millions, and he's right in the beginning. So he's in which spot? The millions. All right? And again, if you need to flip it over, it's kind of awkward right now when we're doing our notes, but when you're working on your worksheet, if you have it flipped over and kind of just want to see, that's fine. So then the next thing we want to do is make sure we can write words into decimals. This is important because in stats especially, there's reports that you have to read or that you have to write. And if it starts a sentence, you know, they're writing it in words, but if you have to do some math with it, you have to be able to pull that out and write it as a number. And that's going to happen here in stats when we're working on problems. So let's make sure we feel comfortable. So it says 625,000. So what I do is I don't even worry about, I should do it here because I'm recording. I don't even worry about the thousands yet. I just write this number, 625. Does everybody have, kind of put it in the middle of the line. Any issues writing 625? Is that all right? Then after I actually write the number, I say, okay, if it needs to be in the thousands place, that means the last number 5 needs to be in the thousands. So how many spaces do I need to be over from the decimal? Do I need to add a 0 in front? I don't know. So you just flip this over and say, okay, tens, hundreds, thousands, the thousands should have 3 numbers behind the decimal. And what do you notice? We already have 3 numbers. So where's the decimal going to go? Nope. The beginning, okay? We're writing a decimal. So this is 625 thousandths, all right? And like I said, the reason why I write 625 first is because if that was 625 10,000ths, we potentially might have to put a 0 before we put the decimal in front, okay? So we want to be careful with that. For example, 12 and 600ths. Well, the and is the decimal point, okay? The and is the decimal point. So whatever you see in front goes in front of the decimal. So what do we see? A 12. And then we have 600ths. Well, how many spaces are the hundreds? 2. But we only have a 6. So where is he going to go? Is he going to go in the first spot or the last spot? Last spot. Whatever you're saying, hundreds, thousands, millions, that number is in that spot. So what do I need to do between the decimal and the 6? Put a 0. We need that place value, okay? And so you can read it 12 and 600ths, okay? So just make sure you always have the right amount of spots filled up. All right, the next thing is we want to write these decimals in words. And what you do is anything in front, you say the number like normal, and then the period, the decimal point is and, all right? So we'll just start this one. This is 5 and. Then whatever's behind the decimal, whatever number you see, start with that. So what number is this? Without place value or anything. How would you just say that number? 62. So let's start with that. 5 and 62. And at the very end, after you've written the number that you see, you say, okay, well, how far over was it? Like, where was that last digit located? It was located in which spot? Tens, hundredths. So we have 62 hundredths. Is that all right? Do you guys have questions on that? And again, it's important to go this direction as well, because if maybe you've done something statistically and you have to report it, you have to be able to start the sentence with that number, but it has to be in words. All right, how are we going to do this one? Well, let's just ignore the decimal part and then focus on what's in front. What's in front? 233, right? So we have 233. Anytime you guys are in those double digits like 33, 62, it's always hyphenated. What word do we use for the decimal point? And then what number, just ignore the 0, what number is that? 56. And then after we write 56, we'll worry about where that 56 is located, okay? So far we have 233 and 56. 56 what? Okay? It is the thousands. And so what you want to do is you write the number, but wherever that last digit is, that's the decimal location. So this is tens, hundreds, thousands. So this is 233 and 56 thousandths. What's one pro about MyMathLab, guys, is that you don't actually have to ever type out these names. There'll be multiple choice. So you're going to pick the one that's written correctly. You don't have to worry about typing, spelling, hyphenating. You just know what spot you're looking at. Okay, so I think this is important, don't get me wrong, because when we're doing statistics, a lot of it is you have a formula and you have to pull numbers to put into your formula. But if they're written in words, you need to know what number it is that you're putting into that formula. So that's important. What also is important is rounding, okay? Because the rounding, the second you're off by a tenth, a hundredth, a thousandth, not only will it affect your answer, but it'll affect MyMathLab, and they'll get mad at you and you'll get frustrated. So do you remember the rounding rules? What number do you look at to decide what happens to the number? The one to the right, okay? And if it's 5 and higher, you bump that number up, and everything else goes to zeros. If it's a whole number. If it's decimals, you kind of ignore anything behind it. If it's 4 and below, you leave it alone. So I had heard this little ditty from a student, 5 and above, give it a shove. 4 and below, leave it alone. I don't know if that helps you remember or not. But so what we have to first do is locate the number that we're going to change or keep the same. So on number 9, we're supposed to round to the nearest 100. So what number is in the 100th spot right now?
7.
The 7. So we got to decide, are we going to keep that 7 to 7, or are we going to bump it up? And who decides it? The 1. 4 and below, leave it alone, right? So the 9 and the 7 will stay the same, and then what happens to the 10 behind it? 0, okay? Something I always mention when it comes to rounding is just literally just think that you had to pay, not that they'd let you get by with this, but you had to pay for something that's $9,710, but you only had $100 bills, right? Are you closer to the $9,710 with $9,700 or $9,800? They wouldn't let you pay it short, but you see what I'm saying? Like, it's just $100 bills. That $10 is a lot closer to the $700 than that $800, all right? 8, we got to round this to the nearest 10,000 spot. So we go ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000. So we're going to see what we're going to do to the 8, but that 6 behind it is going to decide. The 6 is 5 and above, give it a shove. So what does that mean? The 4 stays the same, but what happens to our 8? It goes to 9, and everything else goes to zeros. And again, if you had a bunch of, wouldn't that be great if you had a bunch of $10,000 bills? But the whole idea is 86,000 is a lot closer to 90,000. I shouldn't say a lot closer, but closer to 90,000 than it is 80,000. So that's why we round it up. 9, 10, and 11 is the same idea, but it's with decimals. And the only difference is, guys, instead of like what we did up here, everything went to zeros behind, with decimals, you just like drop off everything that's behind it, okay? You don't want to worry about what's behind it. So this one is round to the nearest 1. Well, which number is in the 1th place? Where's the 1 digit? Is this the ones? Is this the ones? Yeah, the 7 is the 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to decide whether we're going to leave 7 alone or bump it up. What's that 1 decide? Leave it alone. So this is what's weird, but 17. We get rid of everything else. We don't even put 17.0. Because if you put 17.0, what did you just do? You rounded to the nearest tenth, right? If you have a decimal, you're saying you have 0 tenths, and we just want the nearest whole number, okay? Nearest hundredth, in this number, which number is in the hundredth spot? Tens, hundredths, so the 4. What's the 2 do to the 4? Will it go up or will it stay the same? Same. So this is going to just be 6.24, guys, and we just drop the 2. And realize when we read it, it's 6 and 24 hundredths. We rounded to the right spot. We only have hundredths there. And then the nearest tenth is the 2. What's the 8 going to bump that 2 up to? A 3, but you drop everything else, right? And so we don't put 0, 0, because that would be to the nearest thousandths. And we just round to the nearest tenth. Are there any questions there? And even when you go further in this class, if you have to stop and say tenths, hundredths, and thousands, you count them, that's fine. I just want you to feel comfortable with it. All right. I said this yesterday in one of my Math 111 classes. Everybody's favorite thing is charts because I feel like they're just the easiest. Like everything's kind of given to you. You just have to be able to pull what information the question's asking. So in number 12, it just wants to know who won the election. Well, in order to win the election, what do you need? The most amount of votes, right? So who got the most votes there? Miss Lee. Which candidate received the fewest votes? Fewest means the least, right? So which number is the smallest? This is really bad if you're dyslexic, isn't it? Like all the numbers are kind of just switched. Mr. Olson, you are right. And last but not least, which candidate was in second place? That means they got the second amount of numbers. And so notice there's 2 with 3,000. Miss Lee won. So that means Miss Vaporous got second place. Why this is important is that you're going to realize in stats, again, you're going to be doing lots of math when crunching of numbers, but sometimes the numbers are portrayed in graphs. So we want to be able to pull stuff off of it. All of these had you kind of look at just one single person, but I could say, okay, how many people voted total? What would we have to do? Add all the votes. You know, so you'll have different questions asking about that one single chart.